Hello. Yeah, let's start with the next part of this module in which we are going to discuss about Java variables, its creation, initialization, assignment, modification, etc. Okay. So, yeah, in Java, you have a specific space to save the data, save the variable. So once you are going to create a variable, it is going to consume some space in your random access memory in your RAM. Okay, because these are the volatile data. Once the program has like executed everything, then JVM will clear out every memory it has consumed. So it doesn't store them in the secondary memory. Okay, and it is like it takes some time to save in the secondary memory. So to make it faster, Java used to store these variables in a RAM. Okay, suppose this is one of the examples of creating a variable. So first we define the data type, what type of data we are going to store. So that is the type of the variable. Int is the type of the variable which says that we are going to store some integer data. Now this is data, it is the name of the variable. Using this name, we can access the value that is assigned to it throughout the program. Okay. So basically we are creating an integer variable and we are calling it data. And equals is something which is assigning the value from right to its left. So data, the integer variable, is going to have the value 50. Okay. And that 50 is going to be like stored somewhere in the RAM. Okay, so this is not 10, this is going to be 50, right? So that value, once it is stored in the RAM, it has a memory location, right? So that memory location is going to be assigned to data. Data is going to point that memory location. So whenever you want to perform some operation on data, basically that operation is performed at this memory location. Okay, so data doesn't hold the value directly, it stores just the reference where this value is kept in the memory. Okay, right. So there are different types of variable available in Java. Basically, they depend on the behavior of the variable, how the variable is going to be accessed, right? What type of variable it is. So basically, we define them into three categories. One is a local variable, second is the instance, and third is the static variable. Okay, so local variable is something that we define inside the method body. Okay, inside the method body. So let me go back to the previous example that we created the other day. Okay, and we can see like how we can create a local variable. Okay, Nine. Okay, here we have okay, let's remove this file addition test dot class. So the now we just have a Java file which is called addition test, right? We are going to write see how the code was written. So addition test dot Java. Okay, now we are inside the code, and this is a method, right? Public static void main, we are creating a method, right? So within that method, any variable you are going to create, that is going to be an instance variable that belongs to the instance which is like executing this method, which is calling this method. So here int x is an instance variable, y is an instance variable. Okay, right. Then if you want to define something inside the class, you can define it over here. Suppose I want to declare an integer variable over here. So that can be int. I can call it okay, here int I can call it suppose z. Okay, I have already z. Int a. So I can assign a value, suppose 12. So this is not a local variable anymore, right? These variables are called local variable once you are defining them inside the method. Once you are defining them inside the class, okay, once you are defining them inside the class, they are called the instance variable, because once the class is instantiated, or the once the class is like object is created of a class, we call that instantiation, class instantiation, okay, or the object creation of a class. So once you create an object of a class, that object will hold the value, of this variable. So that variable belongs to the object or belongs to the class, the entire class. Then that is called an instance variable. But if the variable belongs just within this method, that is not an instance variable, that is just local to this method. So that is called a local variable. X, Y and Z, these are local variables, and A is an instance variable. Okay. Then there is a third type of variable which we call a static variable. Okay. So you remember from the last class I told you something about static. This is the static thing. So what happens when you say something static? It says that it belongs to the class. Even if you create multiple objects, the same value is going to be held. So if you are creating two objects of addition test, okay, two objects of addition test, and if the variable is static, then only one memory location is created for both the objects. Suppose I am going to create a variable static int, suppose number num1 equal to 1 2 3 4. So if you are creating two different objects of addition test, then also you will have just one num1 for both the class, for both the objects. But if you are creating addition test two objects of this class, then two variables are created, two instance variables will be created, only one static variable is created. I'll show that to you while executing the code, okay, how the static code is going to behave, and how your instance variables behave, and how your memory methods, once you define, once you declare a variable within this method, how that is going to behave. They have a scope within themselves, that within that scope the variables can be accessed. So if you are declaring x, the nearest bracket, here is the curly brace, here is the curly brace. So this is the scope to that variable. X can be executed, x can be used within this scope only. It cannot be used outside this scope. Okay. Now you have A, you have num1, these are the instance variable and the static variable, but they are defined inside the class. So they can be accessed anywhere in the class. They can also be accessed within this method. Okay. The local variables are very local to the method or the block. They cannot be executed outside. Okay. Which one? Significance of? Hello? Static variable, right? So okay, okay, let me show you the examples now only, so you will be able to know how these things are working. Okay, I'll give you some examples. Now we have just, okay, I'll tell you now how the static variable is executed, how the value becomes available outside. So just let me give you one example of that. Okay, let's create one file like variable test. It is a Java file, right? Java source file. So we are going to give Java extension variable test. And remember, when you are creating a class or Java file, the same name, the Java file name is going to be your class file name. So I am going to use variable test as the class name also. Now I have created one file. Now I am going to input some data, class, and sorry, this is not the value, variable test. Okay, this is going to be a class, so I'll give you the bracket. Then I'm going to create I'm going to create an integer value. So this is an instance variable. Okay, this belongs to the class. Okay, Now I'm going to create the main method. For that I have to write public static void main, and I have to pass the argument args. Okay, now I can, okay, now I will be able to use a variable because that belongs to the class, and the method also it belongs to the class. So I don't have to define any other variable inside. If I want to use this, I can directly use that. I am going to write that value into the console system.out.println. So instance variable a, the value of a is plus a. Okay, now let's save this, and the value is saved. So you remember, this is just a variable which is created inside the class. So it has got the class level scope, it can be accessed anywhere in the class, and we call them as instance variables. Okay, okay, and let's execute the code. To compile the code, what we can do, java c, then the file name variable test.java. Once it is compiled, if there is no error, okay, there is some error. Okay, what it is saying, okay, non-static variable a cannot be referenced from static context. Okay, we need to make that static. Okay, now what happens, this is something, this is the method which is a static method. Okay, so how the static thing behaves, let me show you that thing first. I am creating a static integer a. Okay, and now I am going to save this and I am going to compile that. Now that is compiled. Okay, why this static I have given, why int was not possible, why I gave static int, that also I will tell you. Just see how it is behaving. Now I have the variable test, the class file. So I am going to call variable test, java variable test. Now it should give instance variable value a is 10. Okay, now it is able to access the value of variable a, which is an instance variable, right? Suppose I want to create an object. So for creating object, that is okay, let's create some objects of this. Okay, uh, let's do one thing. I'll give you the explanation when we start working on the editor, java compiler like Eclipse editor, then it will be like better for me to explain you. Now the difference between static and non-static variables is something that I'll give you. Is non-static variables, they are created for the objects. Okay, if you have two or three different objects, if you are going to create three different objects of a class, then the non-static variables, like you have the instance variable, they are going to be created three times and they are per object. Okay, the value is per object. But when you have some static variable, you can create n number of classes, n number of objects of that class, but the same static variable is going to be retained, and that variable is created for all the objects. Only one integer static int value is created. So in this case, this static int a will be created for this class, and if you have variable test object 1, variable test object 2, like you will have n number of objects, and they all will have just this one variable, and one memory location is assigned for this. If you are going to create it non-static, that will be different. I'll give you the explanation when we like when we switch into Eclipse editor, because in that I can give you that will be, you will be in a better position to understand that. Once we understand Eclipse and once we understand how to create objects of classes, then you'll be able to know how static things actually behave. If I'm going to create different objects, how they behave. If I'm going to create like n number of objects, but if I am having a non-static field, then how it behaves, that time you will know it. Okay, now for now just remember that just if you have a static method, and within that method you can access only static instance variables, not non-static variable, right? So we had a as non-static, earlier we didn't have static, for that reason gave some compilation error. Okay, okay, let's write. Which one? No, no, no. Inside the classes, inside the method, there is no way to create a static field, because that doesn't make any sense. The static field, they belong to the class, not to the method. And if you define within method, I think that will give you some compilation. You can only create the like local variables inside the method. It should not have any specifiers like static and all. Okay. So now you are able to create the object and the class, and you can define a variable, and you can use that. Let's okay, go to the variable field. Okay, I have told you how local fields like behave. They are created within the functions. They can be accessed to only within the functions. Now you talk about instance variables. They can be like created with. They are just created within the class, and they can be used anywhere inside the class. Okay, and static variable is something which is defined in the class, and they are something which is like initialized only, which is like the object is created only once, and they are per class, they are not per object, the instance variables, sorry, the static variables. And okay, so here is one example in which you can see there is a class called A. The class A is created. You are creating, okay, this is just the instance variable because it belongs to the class. Then you it's a static variable because it has a static keyword. Then you are creating a method. The method name is method, and you are like creating a variable within that method, so that becomes a local method for that method. Okay. Now the data types in Java, basically we have a primitive data type and non-primitive data type. Okay, this is the hierarchy how it looks. Okay, so any data type, if it starts with a small letter, small character, okay, if it starts with a small character, that is a primitive data type. Okay, Boolean, char, byte, sort, int, they have different meaning. Okay, but they are called primitive data types. Okay, what are non-primitive data types? They are basically some class in Java. So any class in Java that starts that must start with a capital letter. It's not mandatory, but this is the standard that people follow, Java follows. So string, if you're going to save your name into a variable, then you need to create a string variable. Basically string is a class. Okay, you're going to create the object of string class, then you can store that variable. If you are going to like if you're going to create, hello, yeah, if you're going to create 10 different integer values, okay, now am I audible? Okay, okay, in between it gets slower, right? Okay, so I was saying the different data types in Java, we basically categorize them into primitive and non-primitive. Primitives are something which you can understand by looking at them. It's something which starts with a small letter because they have limited functionality. Something which can be like extended in the non-primitive types. You have string class, you have array class, you have float. Sorry, you have double class. There are a lot many classes. You have integer class. So these are the things which you will get in non-primitive and in the primitive. So we are going to create some of the primitive and non-primitive types. These are the default value and the size that is assigned when you create some primitive data types. Okay, let us create some of the variables and see how they behave. Okay, variable, within variable test we are going to create. Okay, let's undo that. I'm going to create int x equal to 10. So this is an integer variable. We are going to variable value is x value is x. So this is just a local variable and it's of type int. So if you go back and save it, Java C variable test.java on Java variable test, and the value of x is this. But if you are going to create a string value, if you are going to create a character or byte or boolean, there are different data types. So you can basically create them using the specific type that we had. So you can see there are different types. Boolean is there, char is there, byte is there. So let's create a boolean and a char type. So to create a boolean data type, you need to write boolean because this is the type. First you need to specify the type, like you specified int, you need to specify boolean. Then you can say like suppose is male. Okay, let's is greater. So this is something which is going to say save some value which is yes or no. So you can say boolean is greater true, or you can have the value as false. So these are the only two specific values which can be assigned to a boolean variable. Okay, now you have created a boolean variable. Let's create a character type. So char is a it's a primitive data type. Like you have boolean, it's a primitive data type. So char is going to store just a character. Suppose I am going to save gender. So it's going to be either m or f or something that is a single character. Okay, and that is going to be kept within two single quotes. Okay, character gender equal to male. Suppose I am going to create the mark. Okay, I can use float mark equals to, like suppose you have scored 500 5.5 marks. So I'm going to write 500 5.5 followed by a small f. So this is going to create a float variable that is going to store your mark. Okay, these are the different ways of creating primitive data types, right? Let's create some of the non-primitive data types like string. So string is something which is not defined as a primitive data in Java. You need to create an object of string class. So string, suppose name equals to, you need to give two double quotes, then you can pass the value, string value. This is how a string object is created. This is non-primitive. Okay. Hello. Hello.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
non-primitive data types will have only classes
They are the classes in Java.
or now written classes.
Okay, we're going to create some classes and we're going to create the object of that class also. So let's do one thing. If we stick to this editor, right, if you stick to this editor, then it will be slower to progress. We can use Eclipse. So you have installed Eclipse.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me have a look at your Eclipse, then we can start writing code in Eclipse. So today we will like let's do one thing. Today we talk about the object creation of the classes. Then from tomorrow or onwards, whenever we have some class, we will do with Eclipse. Eclipse will simplify the development. Like it'll help you in a lot of ways. You don't need to compile the code all the time. You don't need to execute it like calling the command. So Eclipse will do it for you. You just need to click some buttons and it will do it for you. It will show you the colors. It will show you the indentation and everything. So it becomes easier for development. Okay, these are the different ways of creating the different variables. Maybe what we call it, primitive and non-primitive data types. Okay, let's create a class. Let's we are going to create two different classes now. Okay, class A and class B. Okay, now we are going to call class A from class B by creating the object of class A, and then we can call the methods of class A from class B. So let's create two classes. First thing is we need to open an editor. Vim, suppose test class object. Okay, we can say test object creation. Object creation. So this is going to be our Java file which is going to store everything. So now I am going to create a class. Suppose I am going to create two different classes. One is class calculator. Okay, this class is going to perform some operations like public. This class is going to be called from outside the class, so it needs to be public. Then it is going to return you an integer data, public int, then it will have a method name as add. It is going to take two input variables, one is int x, one is int y, same as addition. Then you are going to do some of the logic, put some of the logic like int z equal to x plus y, and you are going to return that value, return z. So I am going to call this method from another class. Now I am going to create a different class. What name did we have for this test object creation, right? This name we are going to use to create the class test object creation. This is going to be the class name. It doesn't have any extension here. Now we are going to execute this entire application. So we should have a main method, right? We can have the main method over here, public static void main string args. This is the main method that we are having. From here the execution will begin. Then we are going to write the main logic of calling to that class. Now we are going to create the object of this class calculator, because I cannot call this method without creating the object, without having access to this object, this method. Okay, so I need to create an object of this class. So how you are going to create the object? You can create the object by first writing the class name. Okay, then what reference name you are going to use to access that object which is created. So that reference name you are going to use. Suppose I am going to use calculator CLC or calculator equal to new calculator. Okay, this is how we create the object of the class. Okay, now this line, it says that a calculator object is created, new calculator object is created, and that object is placed somewhere in the main memory in the RAM. Okay, and that reference is assigned to calculator. This is the reference name that we are going to use in our application, so that we can access the variables, the methods and everything that is in the class. So what I am going to do, I am going to call I am going to call that method and store the sum equals to calculator dot add, and I am going to pass two values, one integer, second integer. Now what is happening? Now I am calling the add method of calculator class, but this method, it is going to return an integer value, right? That integer value can be assigned to this sum. So I am writing int sum, and this assignment operator is going to get the value from this method and it is going to assign that to sum. So sum is going to have 3 now. So now I have stored the value of x and y and addition. Now that method has to be called over here. Now that is called and I have the value. I am going to print system dot out dot print ln. So I am going to write a string over here, sum is plus sum. Okay, so this is how we are going to create the object. Let's see if everything goes fine. It should run. It should compile first. Java C test object creation.java. Now I think it has compiled. Now as I have told you, if this Java file, if this Java text file .java file, it is containing two classes. See, you can see there are two different classes. One is calculator class, another is test object creation class. Then you should be having two different dot class files. Okay, you will have two different dot class files. Let's see how many dot class files you have. ls, we have compiled it. Now you can see there are test object creation dot class, and calculator.class. These are the two classes which are created. Now I'm going to execute. So if I'm going to write Java test object creation, then it is going to call the main method inside test object creation, and that method is going to create the object of calculator, and then it is going to execute. So it is saying sum is 3. So you got me, right? So this is how the object is created. But while creating the object, there are different terminologies that you need to remember. So while this is the class name, this is the reference name that we will use later, like we have used it here, right? You can use the reference name to call the method add, which is there inside the calculator class, right? So this reference name is used to call that object which is created. Now new calculator, it is going to create the object of
It's
this
11
class.
o'clock.
Okay, this class is going to be instantiated when we call a new calculator, and that memory location, that reference is this one. Okay. Now we have called the method and we have passed the value, it has returned us the sum, and we have saved it over here. Now we are printing it over here, right? Okay, let's do all this thing in Eclipse Editor. I'll show you how we can use the Eclipse Editor to write the code. Same code we can write in Eclipse also. Okay.
It's not working.
Sorry.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello? Yeah, I have a small question.
Okay,
So
go
this
on.
new keyword is only for, yeah, the new keyword is used
To create the object
for
of the
what?
class, just to create the object of the class, which we call instantiation, object instantiation.
Okay, so it will create the object and assign the memory location.
Yeah, we can create the object only with the help of new keyword.
Okay.
Fine.
Yeah.
Okay. I have created the class objects. Okay.